to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. This episode we have Netflix 246th film from 2020. It's the French action thriller called Lost Bullet, or Balle, perdue. It's directed by Guillaume Pierret. It stars Alban Lenoir, Nicolas, Duvauchelle, and Ramzy, Bedia. I'm Jesse. I'm here solo for this one. Apologies for my pronunciation on those French names. Don't speak a word of French, so sorry. But I'm here to talk about this film because I've seen it. If you haven't seen it and you're keen to check this one out, give us a pause now. Come back later on because I'm going to talk about this film. I'll try to not spoil it too much, but we do start our show with the Fast Flicks, where we'll do a quick little summary of what the film's about. So this one is about this almost ex-con. He's not quite an ex-con, but he almost is, and he's framed for murder. And it's a murder that he didn't commit, so he's got to find the lost evidence to prove his innocence. And based on the title, I'm sure you can tell that this lost evidence is possibly a bullet. Let's get into this one. I think, as we often say, and I often say with international films on Netflix, it's very hard to find out anything about how the film was put together. Realistically, I think that the movie was shot over 38 days in the Mediterranean port city of Strait in France. So that was an interesting little filming location. The director, Guillaume Pierret, he considered shooting the film on 16mm film. Would have been a cool look, but he had to switch to digital because of the budgetary concerns. This film already has a sequel, The Lost Bullet 2. It was released by Netflix on the 10th of November 2022, and a third one has been announced as well. So I'm not sure whether that's based on people watching this and eyeballs or whether it's been popular, but we will get to that in a second as what people are saying about this. But before we do that, this was released on the 19th of June 2020 on Netflix worldwide. Across the world, the title has a couple of different variations. In Finnish, it's called The Missing Bullet instead of The Lost Bullet. Cool. In Germany, it's called The Stray Bullet. That also makes sense. In Cantonese, this takes a bit different take on this film. It's called Car Modification Invincible. And that's because our main character likes to modify cars. In Japanese, it's called The Lost Bullet Car Chase in a Distress. Distress. In Norwegian, it's called Projectile on the Way. In Polish, it's called The Lost Orb. So I guess the bullet's a bit of an orb. In Swedish, it's called An Expired Bullet. And in Vietnamese, it's called Ammunition. Cool bunch of different titles for that one. Alright, let's have a look at what critics and audiences are saying about this one. On Rotten Tomatoes, it sits at 78% on 9 reviews. That's fresh. The audience has it at 58%. That's on more than 100 ratings, so not quite fresh. IMDb sits at a 6.3 out of 10 on 13,000 ratings, so that's again on the higher side. Letterboxd, it sits at a solid 3 out of 5 on nearly 7,000 ratings. Been logged by 24,000 people though. And on Metacritic, it sits at a 78 on 4 critic reviews. That's in the green end. And the audience at a 6.3 on 12 reviews, also in that green end too. A new thing that we're going to try and put in here, the Metacritic score, if we can find it. Not many critics have seen this one though. Well, what are my early thoughts on this one? I thought it was well made. It was well performed. It looks good. And the practical action is super high quality. I recommend this one. I enjoyed this. I thought this was really good. So let's break into the characters, talk about what some of the characters do in this film. And I guess we start with Leno, who's our main protagonist. He's this mechanic who ends up in jail because he tries to rob a jewelry store by driving through a couple of cement brick walls. And while he's in jail, he gets offered this exchange program to help, I guess, the cops pimp their cars out like his, so you can sort of use the cop cars as like battering rams, I guess. He's I mentioned he's probably a little bit gutsy and a little bit brash in his actions. He does seem to want to do the right thing, and through the action sequences we've seen, he seems to only hurt people as much as he needs to. It's not like he uses guns a lot in this or anything like that. He only uses the force that he needs to get what he wants or get where he needs to go. And I guess if we look at the cop that sort of got him out, Shiraz, he's the guy that he's got this good heart. He's a cop. He thinks people deserve second chances. He's frustrated that police don't have the resources or the cars or the power that they need in these cars to actually, stop criminals. And he does have a love for cars himself. He's got this Renault that, he doesn't let anyone else touch it. He loves this car, and this good heart nature is a nice sort of character to sort of go next to Leno. If we look on the other side of things, though, we've got Areski, who's this dodgy cop. He sort of, I think, is a bit jealous of Shiraz, and he wants to be in charge. He wants to be the boss. He wants to do things his way, and not necessarily the legal way, though. And his side partner is this guy called Marco. Marco I sort of liked. I thought he sort of had the chance of changing, but that was sort of thrown away very quickly. The only other sort of character, we've got Quentin, who's sort of this brother-like character for Leno. Leno takes him under his wings. Quentin was abandoned as a kid, and sort of, we see him, he's a minimal sort of character, as is Julia, who's sort of put in as this love interest, I guess, of Leno. But this love interest isn't really addressed. But she's there to help him in his times of needs. Alright, the director, Guillaume Pierret. French, obviously. First feature film. Done some TV, done some shorts, as well as the sequel to this film, The Lost Bullet 2, Back for More is the subtext to that film. So we'll get to that film in a couple of years' time. Alright, let's talk about some scenes. What are some things that I liked in this? I think this is the scene that if you see this film, you're probably going to want to talk about this film. But there is talk about this scene. This scene where Leno is sort of locked up in the cop shop and he breaks out. It's just this completely nuts action sequence. It's such a mess. There's laptops used as weapons. It goes on and on. Leno he's almost escaped. He's out on the steps. He's almost grasping with his hand to get out, and then he gets pulled back in, and then he gets capsicum spray, and he ends up escaping. Such a good little sequence of physical hand-to-hand combat almost. And a lot of the action scenes in this are the highlights, I guess, too. There's this scene where Leno and Quentin are in this car together, and they get away, and then they've had to fight and sort of put some bad cops away, and we get this cut back to a rescue, that bad cop, thinking that that Leno and Quentin are going to be in the boot of this car, and he opens the boot and it's his men that are actually in there, and his response was like, "That's not what I expected." I had a laugh. I thought that was funny. There's a scene towards the end where Leno is filling his car, or not his car, but Shiraz's red Renault car. He's filling it with gas, and his face is all beat up after all these action sequences, I guess. And there's these people that are filling up their car as well, just looking at him like a little bit shocked. And his response to them was, it's for a movie. that made me laugh too. And then I guess the final sort of car chase sequence that sort of combines into two sort of sequences. We've got this idea that Leno's sort of modified this Renault, and he's got this big hook on the front of the car, and he breaks through this roadblock, and that was cool. And then there's this follow-on chase. He keeps going along the riverbanks, and a rescue gets into a car, and he's driving alongside him. Then Julia rocks up and wedges in between the two and uses it as like a battering ram, and it was just a cool power move, and cool to see cars flip, and the camera work I thought was cool through that scene. So it's really nice little scenes, action sequences in this film. A couple of things I didn't like. I think Quentin, spoiler alert, he dies. I thought that it was a little bit over the top, his death sequence, especially the reaction we get from Leno too. I thought that was a bit over the top. I think they try to solve this bullet in the car at the end, we get almost like these CSI Vegas or CSI Miami shots of like the CSI crime team trying to look at the car window and the dashboard. It was a bit over the top. And finally, like Areski, this bad guy, towards the end, we have no context about anything other than his work throughout this film. It's like he's dedicated to his work, that's it. But we have this shot at the end where he goes home to pack his bags to run away and get money, and we literally see him looking through this window at his wife and his kids playing in the yard, and then he just walks off. There was no context for that family, so that scene was a little bit laughable, to say the least. Alright, themes, some ideas in this one. I think, obviously corruption in the police force, we've seen that in a lot of films over the years, but the idea of putting trust into people, but then through this character of Leno too, you've got that idea of second chances, allowing people to change, allowing people to grow and do the right thing, and good versus evil, bad versus good, etc. What did I take away from this one? I sort of touched on this in the scenes anyway, but some of these action set pieces were so good to see, especially because they don't have this over-reliance on CGI. They were all practically done, and they just look so real. Appreciated the work that they did do on those scenes. IMDb, we have a segment where we talk about if we jumped on IMDb to check anyone out. I wanted to check Leno out, the main guy in this film, played by Alban Lenoir. I liked his work. He had a familiar sort of face, but the only film that I've seen that he was in was Taken with Liam Neeson, but he was an uncredited security agent. So definitely don't know him from anywhere. I think that it was interesting as I was looking into him though that he used to be a stuntman and he did a lot of the stunts in the film himself. So that's a good little context behind him as an actor. Some questions or some ponderings about this one. I think Areski, I mentioned before that we see him sort of escape from his family. I haven't seen the sequel, but I'd like to just put this onto audio catalogue now and say, I'm guessing the sequel has some sort of revenge plot where he goes after Leno. I just reckon that's going to happen. Haven't looked it up, but that's my guess. We'll see if I'm right in a couple of years' times. The other thing I guess too is we had Marco, this character who at the end, they sort of make it out as if Leno's shot him dead, but we go back and we sort of see that Leno actually tied him up in the barn, but we didn't go back and check on him. So did a rescue go and get him? Is he teamed back up with him? What actually happened to him? I'm interested, I'm intrigued, so maybe that will be answered in the sequel too. The only other sort of observation, that rampage that I really liked through the cop shop, it was really good. The sequences are good. It was cool seeing this one guy take out so many cops. But surely Leno needed some sort of consequence or time for that beat up that he held, because there were so many police officers in there that got injured. He'd be doing so much time, but he's just let off the hook because he solves this crime, even though he commits so many more crimes in the in the doing. All right, I'm ready to wrap this one up. I was into this. I liked it. I thought it was good. There's not much character development, but that's probably not why you're going to watch this film. You're watching it for the cool car chases. You're watching it for the action sequences. And as I said, those action sequences are done really effectively. They keep your eyes glued to the screen, so I appreciated that. Thought this was worth a watch. 3 out of 5 for me on this film. As always, we have all the socials that you can think of. Look us up at Flix Forum. The question I want to put on our social media post with this one is, are you interested in checking out the sequel? I am. It's not very often I say I'm interested in checking out the sequel, but I'm pretty excited. I'm like, do I just go and watch the second one now that I'm so into this film? It was good. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hopefully you enjoyed the chat. Next week, we're back. Next week, we are back with another international film, but this one's from Turkey. It's from 2020. It's a drama. It's called One Way to Tomorrow, or Urena Tek Balle. It's directed by Ozan Akatan. It stars Metin Akdolca, Dylan Sesik, Deniz, and Tevfik Kartal. That's what we got next week, a Turkish film. I'm thinking this is Netflix's first Turkish film, because I don't remember doing one, and we're doing them all in order, so that's what we're up to next week. If you're keen on that, watch it in the meantime. Other than that, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.